my name is Neil McHale. I am a long-term Googler, and I should point out at this stage that I am not a parent. However, I did grow up gay in 1980s Ireland, so hopefully I'll be able to contribute a little bit to the conversation, probably more about what not inclusive parenting actually looks like. So I'm just going to introduce the panel now. So firstly we have Lynne Tracey, who is a well-known figure in Irish advertising, and was the first female president of the Irish Institute of Advertising Practitioners in Ireland, and is on the board of many non-for-profit organisations, including Trans Equality Network Ireland. We have Bella Fitzpatrick, who is the Exec Director of Shout Out, a community of volunteers dedicated to improving the lives of LGBTQ people in Ireland through education, and has reached thousands of its students through workshops that have been focused on tackling bullying. We have Dill Withramik-Singha, and I know I said it earlier okay, but I think I struggled through that one. So Dill is a broadcaster, journalist and activist, well known for her award-winning programme on News Talk radio called Global Village, as well as weekly podcasts and TEDx talks. And last but very not least, we have Shiran Aharon, who is a senior exec here at Google and is the Dublin lead for the Gaiglers and Allies Employee Relations group. So thank you all very much for taking some time for us today. The way we're going to run this is I've got some questions that I'm going to throw to the panel, but would love this to be as interactive as possible, so give people an opportunity to start thinking about questions now. So maybe to get us kicked off, I'm conscious that that was a very brief introduction that I gave, so I'd love to just ask each one of you to introduce yourselves in a little bit more detail, do yourselves a bit more justice than I possibly could have, and maybe tell us about your journey to inclusive parenting and why you think it's so important. So maybe if we start with you, Lynne.
I deliberately sat here so Shiran would be first.
I'd like to mix it up.
That cunning plan didn't work. Hi. Inclusive parenting kind of came to us. I would have hoped that we would have been inclusive parents regardless of our own personal circumstances, but I have 4 children, 3 of whom identified as male at birth and 1 of whom identified as female. And on the 4th of... gender has always been a conversation in our house since my oldest, who's now 21, was 13. And people are very righteous in our house about social issues and people's rights. And when, on the 4th of March 2016, my second eldest came in to me and said, Mum, I think I might be transgender. And it was definitely a surprise. And there was a lot of crying and a lot of hugging that night. Am I allowed to swear?
Oh, swear away.
So when I told my husband, he goes, well, that's some great big cosmic fuck up, isn't it? So, but in a positive way as opposed to in a negative way. And so we were very lucky. We live in Dublin. We have a really good GP. We made an appointment to see our GP. Our GP was incredibly supportive of my child. We were referred. Luckily, at the time, there was a psychiatrist here because you obviously have to be diagnosed with gender dysphoria, and this psychiatrist had just moved, and this was her specialisation. So, Aileen Murta out in Willow Grove. So we were diagnosed. We got seen very quickly, and in June of 2016, she got her diagnosis, and we just came out absolutely publicly because it's not anybody else's story. It's not scandal. It's not gossip. This is who my child is. She got her gender recognition certificate a year ago. Her name is Alice Rosa Toomey. Bizarrely, it is much easier to get a gender recognition certificate than it is to open a bank account for a 16-year-old. And that is very true, but there are many flaws in the system. But she's in college now. She's a wonderful person, so I'm a very proud trans parent.
Thanks for sharing that, Lynne. So, Shiran, maybe we will go to you this time.
Yes. So, being gay and coming out to my very religious family in Israel wasn't the best inclusive parenting experience that I could have. But being a mom now to a 1 year and 8 months boy, for me it's very important to raise him as an inclusive parenting, to make sure that educate him that there is a diverse world, to make sure that he respected individuals for who they are, and respect and be with compassion to one another, and understand that there is a world of diversity other people around us. Being a same-sex parents with a 1 year and 8 months boy, it's also making sure that we are very diverse and very different to most of the families that we are out there, heterosexual families. So we are very different from other families that you see around us. So for us, it's very important also to make sure that this is something that's being discussed about our challenges and our advantages also, being a same-sex parents, and being celebrated out there as well.
Thank you, Sharon. Bella.
Is this working?
It
No?
is indeed. Yeah,
Oh, okay.
it is working.
I'm also not a parent, but I am the mom of my friend group. So, is that the same?
Totally
No.
the same. Not quite the same.
Yeah, I'm not a parent because that looks really hard. But I do run educational workshops on LGBT issues for people who work with young people or people who are parents or guardians or foster parents or social workers or youth workers or, you know, parent means a lot of different things, and it really does take a village to raise a young person and really to shed yourself of the assumptions. And that's really what being an inclusive parent is listening to your child and not saying no when they tell you something about themselves, just being like, okay, parenting, from my outside expert opinion, having not been a parent, seems like improv, where you just say yes and so hey, you know, I'm a girl, yes, and what your name, and yeah, that type of thing. So it's all about it being child-led rather than it being led from your assumptions from the world, which is fundamentally a broken place.
So we will get some opinions from the other parents about whether it actually is like improv or not, but thank you, Bella.
So my full name is Mihinda Kulasuri Nancy Leah Dilhani Vikramasinghe.
So I pronounced it perfectly.
Yeah, perfect. That's not my address, that's not my life story. So people usually ask me, where am I from? Born and brought up in Italy, parents are Sri Lankan, lived in the Middle East working as a flight attendant. I don't know where your emergency exits are in case of an emergency. And moved to Ireland 19 years ago. And like Sharon, I came from a very religious background. My parents were Jehovah's Witnesses. So I was 16 when Madonna's song Express Yourself was in the charts that summer. And as a Jehovah's Witness girl, while preaching, my eyes locked with another Jehovah's Witness girl, and I fell madly in love, and we had the most amazing love affair in that summer with Madonna's Express Yourself as a soundtrack. But I knew when I came out it would be an absolute disaster, and it was, because they actually threw me out on the streets when I was 16 years old, and I was homeless for 4 years. So, like many LGBTQ people, I felt I had to emigrate to find a country where I could be myself. So that's why I ended up going to Bahrain first, and then finally I found myself here in Ireland. And coincidentally, my arrival in Ireland coincided with Dublin Pride. So within 24 hours of my feet touching Irish soil, I found myself dancing down O'Connell Street singing It's Raining Men. It's really bizarre. But that was a pivotal moment, because it was broad daylight. For the first time in my life, I was surrounded by people who were like me and were proud of who they were. And that was the real beginning for me. And then, you know, trauma has a way of, rearing its ugly head when you're safe. And unfortunately, in 2006, it did, and I found myself in a really bad way, and I went into 1 in 4, got counseling, and it was in front of a psychotherapist that I found myself, going into this, journey of trying to remove all these horrible messages that I had received from my parents. And one of those messages was, gay people shouldn't have children. And up until 6 years ago, that's what I carried. That was probably one of the last things that I had to forcibly remove from myself. And thankfully I did, because I met Anne-Marie, my wife. We set up a mental health support service that really provides inclusive services to the LGBTQ community. That was our firstborn. And then our secondborn is a 4-year-old, Phoenix, was born in the week of the marriage referendum. He was meant to arrive the 1st of June, but of course I was just too excited that he came early, and he wanted to be part of Irish history, I suppose. And it didn't help that at that time I was the first lesbian in the public eye, who was working as a journalist, was very open about my pregnancy, because the no campaigners were like, if you let the gays get married, they're all going to have children. So we were like, okay, well, this is what it's going to look like. Are we scary? No, right? And then so I carried Phoenix, and then 2 years later, Anne-Marie had Xavier. So one of the advantages of two mums is that there's 4 boobs. So there's like, there's lots of breastfeeding. We take turns, and it's just. And also the other thing is everything that Anne-Marie kind of got wrong with me when I was breastfeeding. We had a home birth. Actually, our home birth was actually televised and shown on telly. So when she kind of like never say to a pregnant woman when if they're hungry, but you just ate. Never say that. Because then 2 years later, Anne-Marie was like practically devouring this sandwich, and I was like, I could, I don't say anything. So inclusive parenting is something that I care about hugely, and I'm so privileged to be here today to talk to you. But it's a challenge, because every day, like just this morning, Phoenix looks very much like me. He's a mini me, and Xavier is a mini Anne-Marie. And this morning, just a lady off the street came up to us. Oh my God, your kids are cute, so cute. Oh, you look just like your mom. And then she looked at my daughter, and you must have daddy's eyes. It's a complete stranger on the street. So it's like you coming as a gay person, you always have to come out. As a same-sex parent, you continuously having to come out. So that can have its challenges.
Thank you, Jill. Definitely learned a little bit more about what some of the advantages of same-sex parenting are there. Maybe just to keep on that thread with same-sex parenting, maybe just to turn to you, Sharon, what are some of maybe the challenges and advantages that you've seen?
Yes. So unfortunately, still today, there are lots of illegal and legal issues and operational issues that same-sex parents are facing when they want to become parents. It's rarely that you have same-sex parents that become parents accidentally. When you and becoming a parent, unfortunately, we are facing a lot of legal and operational issues. Still, same-sex marriage is illegal in many countries, and in some countries there are still also forbidden rules on being LGBTQ people. Becoming parents, even here in Ireland, and for us, my wife and myself, we wanted to be both registered as a birth certificates for our son, but unfortunately here in Ireland it cannot happen. So we had to go to Belfast in order to deliver our son, in order to be both registered as a birth certificates as mum for our kids. Those small things that for some people seems very trivial and obvious, for us it's not obvious, and we need to face them when becoming parents and to think about it. So cost of having also a child and going also the procedures of having a child, this is something that very much thought through, and we are need to face when becoming parents. Except of that, we are also have, unfortunately, still people saying that gay parents shouldn't be parents, and that raising a kid without the opposite sex gender is basically not raising the kids in an environment that they should be. So facing those situations of discrimination that still exist, and having those kind of like issues when we are exposed to and our kid is exposed to, is unfortunately challenging as well. Advantages of being same-sex parents: we are very well committed. It was a very thought process, and it took us a lot of time in order to bring our kid to the world. We are very committed parents, and very invested in our kid, because we had it took us a while until we managed to bring our kid to the world, and so very committed, open-minded, raising for tolerance and resilience, and making sure our kid is being raised as an inclusive parenting and understanding the diverse of the world, and that there are different peoples and different cultures, and how to embrace all of them.
Thank you. Maybe just to build on that, so particularly as a non-parent, like, how do you experience some of that discrimination for people saying that gay people shouldn't be parents? Like, is it online? Like, what people actually say to you?
Some of them are online, some of them can be people saying it to us, especially, again, growing up in Israel and being the daughter of a very religious parents, that also being taught that gay people shouldn't have rights or shouldn't be parents and should be like a second type citizenship in the world. It's very hard to face those situations when you're just even going into the supermarket and some people are throwing comments to you. And even when not recently, we were on a flight, and it was my wife and myself and our son, and a flight attendant came to us and asked me to move. And she never asked someone else to move if there would be a different sex parents. And we said, but we are together, we are a family. And she said, yes, but she will be able to manage by herself. Can you move, please? We want these seats for another parent to sit with his daughter. So those kind of situations we are still facing, unfortunately.
Very sorry to hear that. I'm conscious we've been talking about sexual identity here and same-sex parenting. You know, obviously we just need to be sensitive about kind of conflating sexual identity with gender identity. So maybe Lynne, you can just give us a little bit more on, you know, we've heard from Jill and Sharon, like what is the experience that you've been, and should we be thinking about this differently perhaps in terms of how we respond to it?
I would, as I said earlier, I would have considered myself relatively, you know, versed in gender politics and sexual politics and so forth. And I only know now how little I know yet. You know, that it's just a constant learning. And people do conflate gender identity with sexual identity. And it's something Dill said, and I'm really gobsmacked by some of the questions you get asked. And it's not from malice or you know, that they people wanting to be prurient. It's actually they're just kind of thinking, this is the kind of question I would ask. So you know, whenever it comes up that Alice is transgender, people go, oh, so how far along is she? And has she had the surgery yet? And is she having the surgery? And so how does that work, you know, I mean, I'm sitting there and I'm going, well, should I ask you about your genitalia or about your children's genitalia? Because everybody's journey is so different, and Alice's journey is completely her own decision, how far she wants to go, how far she doesn't want to go. That's not I wouldn't ask her, I'm her mother. I'll be guided by what she wants. So, and people assume then, you know, well, oh, she's transgender, so is she gay? You know, and you know, that conflating of those things, it was quite interesting. And a colleague of mine who was on the TENI board proudly says, well, I used to be straight and now I'm two of the LGBTs because I'm now gay and trans, whereas before I wasn't either of them, you know. So it is, and I think it's a wider educational role. Now I have to say, you know, I do believe we live in a bit of a bubble with my family and where we live and the schools and everything that we've been through. But we've really had very little negativity directed at us, and maybe part of that is because we kind of came out so overtly, and kind of, you know, it's very hard to be difficult when people have said this is who we are. But it's very frequently conflated, and as I say, the more I know, the more I realise I don't know is the reality.
And I think, as you said, like education, obviously a key part of that. So, you know, maybe Bella, through the outreach that you do in schools, like again, how do you see some of the kind of sexual identity versus gender identity, and, you know, how do you respond to it?
Well, I think it's important to show that, like, the reason why LGBTQIAP+, however many letters you want to put in, like, the reason they're all together is because the root cause of our discrimination is the same. And that really stems from a very narrow understanding of both biological sex and of gender. So what I would ask is, with adults, when I'm doing training, whether be they social workers or parents or whatever, you know, when someone has a baby, what's the first thing everybody asks?
Is it a boy or a girl?
Boy or girl, you know? Why do we ask this? You know, there's not a lot to ask, really. You know, like, babies they don't have that many interests. So, you know, like, I don't even think about gender in that way at all, but still, my cousin had a baby, and my brain was like, don't say it, don't say it, don't say it, don't say it. And I was like, a boy or a girl? You know, why do we do that? It's such a weird thing to do. And then, you know, we ask why, and some people say, because you might want to buy, like, a pink thing or a blue thing. I'm like, yeah, I got to color code our baby so people know what their genitalia is. That's normal. You know, that's a flawed system, and it comes packaged with so many different things. It comes packaged with behavioral ideals. Boys will act like this, girls will act like this, boys will fancy girls, girls will fancy boys. And that, like, it's all one big mess. It's one big ball of Christmas lights that's all tangled. So really, while yes, individual groups have certain needs, absolutely, and deserve their own space. We are all fighting the same cis heteropatriarchy, that we're all trying to smash together. So try to see them as, yes, individual, communities, but also we're all fighting the same thing, which actually impacts everyone. So to try not to make it seem like these are, these rights over here, but they are actually impacting everyone. Like my mom, I wasn't raised by LGBT parents, but I was raised by a single parent. So I would still get questions like, oh, you must look like your dad. And I'm like, well, I don't know. Or even things like, I have my mom's maiden name. And then sometimes, you're filling out a form and that's for your mother's maiden name. And it'll be like, you won't be able to continue because it's like, no, it must be different to your last name. And I'm like, that people can have babies without marriage. Come on, Karen. So yeah, I think it's about linking these things all together through one continuous thread so people can think about them more clearly.
Sounds good. So keep thinking about your questions because I'm going to ask these guys one more question. I suppose building on that now, so we start to think about, how do we educate our children with respect to these issues, like, particularly for parents here who may not be LGBT themselves. Kids ask so many questions. How in your experience and as parents, should you prepare for that, or how do we think we can support kids asking questions? So Jill, do you want to take that?
I suppose we have, both Anne-Marie and myself, are very committed to make sure that we create a comfortable environment in our home that our kids can talk to us about anything, right? Because I think it's because we're both psychotherapists. It's all about emotional well-being, and I know growing up in a home where you're not supposed to ask questions, so but still, it still catches you because Phoenix started pre-kindergarten last year, and he was 3 years old, and we were preparing ourselves for that question, who's my daddy question. I thought when he was 5, 6. No, 1 week after he started pre-kindergarten, I was having dinner. I was just about to get my food into my mouth, and he was like, "Mama, where's my daddy?" And I was like, I nearly choked on my dinner because I knew it was coming, but I didn't realize it would come so quickly. So Amri and I was like, well, we had kind of rehearsed it. We were like, well, Mama and Mommy wanted to have a family and we couldn't, so we went down to a clinic, and there's a nice gentleman out in Denmark that when you are 18, you and your sister can get on a plane and go meet him, and we'll be across the street in a cafe with binoculars and probably a baseball bat waiting to make sure this guy's a good guy, but this question comes up quite a bit, and then the other question, speaking of gender, because it's my pet peeve, I identify as a woman, but as a young child, I always liked things that are stereotypically boys stuff, whether it's cars or whether it's sports or whatever, so even now, the boy or girl question. So I was always saying, our children identify as a boy or girl, but who knows? We're waiting to see if they might change their mind. But Phoenix has started. Now he's questioning gender and he's exploring. He was wearing a dress the other day, and I was like, this is fantastic. But he will look at me and say, "No, Mama, you're a boy," and I'm like, no, Phoenix, I'm a girl. I'm very comfortable about the fact that I'm a girl. But he's obviously comparing me to the other moms in his school, and he sees that I'm different. I do things that are different to the other moms, and it's just very interesting. But when he asks those questions, I do feel that it almost triggers me, in a sense, where our kids are great at that. They just know your buttons, and so he always no, you're a boy, Mama. No, you're a boy, and I'm like, no. Not a boy. And then the other thing about when I went buying girls' clothes for my daughter, I found myself not wanting to buy pink, which is not a bad thing, but it's not to avoid pink completely and not to put her in a dress is also a bad thing, because that shows my own shame about being a woman, So listen, I'm going to be in therapy for life, but these are things that I'm constantly questioning, and the beauty is our kids feel that they can have this conversation with us at dinner, and they're then talking to their friends, and that's the best thing, So just keep it open, and it's not comfortable, but it's not. Parenting is not meant to be comfortable. Sorry, it's not. It's not easy. Sorry.
Maybe to you, Bella, because again, actually, maybe what age group of children are you typically talking to, and how do you handle some of these questions?
We are normally in secondary level schools, so anywhere between 11 and 18. The 18-year-olds are like, we need to be studying, please go away. And the 11-year-olds have a lot of very interesting questions and all the ages in between. I think they're so starved for information that they're just like a flurry with all sorts of questions for us, particularly around some of the misinformation being spread about trans healthcare, particularly for young people. And it is actually coming from a place of concern, but they're like, I'm concerned about 10-year-olds getting sex confirmation surgery. And I was like, well, you needn't be. It's not happening, and it's a little bit concerning that this is just being bandied about like it's truth. And I'm like, if you want to know the actual reality of what it's like to try to access any sort of healthcare as a trans young person, I can tell you it, but it's certainly not anybody getting surgery, at the age of 10, obviously. But there is a worrying trend I'm noticing at the moment of like alt-right material being brought up in the classroom, so they'll be quoting, the Jordan Petersons of this world.
Wow.
Because it is being targeted towards young boys. On the internet, like they're literally, the alt-right's trying to find impressionable young boys and giving them this material. So they're saying to me like, well, Jordan Peterson says, there's only two genders or whatever like that. And what I try to do is say, oh, so you're obviously well versed in queer theory. Great. Let's have a chat. I'm a little concerned about that, but what I'm hoping is they're going to burn through this material real quick and come out the other side of it. Because these are smart, intelligent, curious young men, and they're just being taken in by the dark side. So, unfortunately, I have to know though what Jordan Peterson's saying because I have to be able to counteract it. So that's a pain in the butt. But yeah, it's great. It's great. Like children, they have the best questions, and the younger you get them, the more cool they are with everything. It's people say sometimes we don't want you to go into our schools putting ideas in kids' heads. Like, oh, we're taking ideas out. We're trying to undo the nonsense you've all been doing. Like all kids have a completely fluid sense of gender, completely. And we program them to think about it, and they become obsessed with it because they're trying to find the edges of it. That's why probably why your kid saying you must be a boy is trying to figure it out, because some kid has probably said something like, oh, girls wear dresses, and he's like, my mom doesn't. So they're like, this fundamentally makes no sense, so let me run up against the walls of it and try to find the edges of it. And we have no satisfying answers for them, unfortunately, because there is no edge. It just goes on forever.
And so to that point, because you mentioned being able to kind of counteract with facts and provide the correct information, like to what extent is that useful versus, as you say, trying to find the edges of it?
I think you can give the information, and you're giving it maybe not to that one kid but to everybody else who's listening, but ultimately you don't have to get it to be respectful. And that's ultimately what the goal of Shout Out is saying, that's cool, you don't have to get it, like that's fine, but can you use the right pronouns? Can you be respectful? Can you be sound? And most kids they can do that, even if they can't get their head around it. Like some of these concepts are really confusing. I can't even get my head around them either, but like I can be nice.
Excellent. So, questions, everybody. I'm sure you have lots of questions for these guys.
I had a question about how do you, I guess it's a general parenting question, how do you prepare your kids for, the inevitability of them being seriously challenged on either the parents or the parenting or the ideas that are being put in their head? I'm sorry, the ideas are being raised with. And more than that, how do you prepare yourselves, the parents among you, how do you prepare yourselves for when you're being challenged by your child? Because every child turns to a teenager and they become little monsters, and they experiment with developing their own views and ideas, and of course they want to challenge yours. And how do you prepare yourselves for that? Because that itself can become quite, hard and harsh.
I suppose my children are slightly older than Dill or Sharan's. They're aged between 16 and 21, and I have 4. And I think there are exceptions to what I'm about to say, but I'll explain those in a moment. It's honesty, and it's giving them as much information as you think they need to answer the questions they're asking you. So if they ask, and this goes from when they're very young to, why can't I pee standing up? To very simple things. The Santa Claus thing is the lie I kept going and still keep going in my house.
Excuse me, what?
Oh no, Santa Claus still comes and they all write letters still. So that's the one exception. But
With a 21-year-old.
oh, they all do, absolutely. That's the bitch in me. But I think it's about honesty and about. These are intelligent, like whether they're 3 or 13 or 23. These are intelligent people who are absorbing what you're saying, and it's treating them with respect. So if I think when we're talking about inclusive parenting, I think it's very important because what Bella is talking about applies to everything, across ability, across race, across age, across all of these other things that are absolutely as much part of inclusive parenting as gender and sexuality. So I think it's whatever question you're asked, you try and kind of pitch it to the level they will understand and be as honest as you can. When they ask how babies are made, we tell them in the simplest possible way, how is the baby coming out? And I tell them, and they generally went, that's disgusting, and moved on because now they know. But I remember one parent in the primary school was pregnant with their 4th child, and her oldest child was about 10 or 11, and she told the children that the baby was found under a cabbage patch. And this isn't that long ago. I'm kind of going like, why would you do that? So I think there's so many aspects to this, but it's honesty and knowing your audience.
It's so funny. Phoenix was at our second home birth, so he knows exactly where babies came from. No, honestly, absolutely. But I think I did a lot of work on myself. To echo Shiran, when you kind of decide to become a parent, you do so much work on yourself because, as a couple, it's like if there's any cracks, those cracks are going to be. They're going to explode open, so you have to do a lot of work on yourself. And I was very conscious, and my wife as well, not to try as best as possible not to pass on the intergenerational hurt, because I seriously believe this. Everyone has passed on a shitload of hurt from one generation to the other, and I could very easily, pass that on. I remember even as early as when Phoenix was like tiny, and I remember going, wow, when he cried, I picked him up. I heard him, I responded, and something in my brain said, but that never happened to me. Why should he get that? So I was very conscious about these thought processes in my brain, and I could go the old way and do exactly what my parents did, or figure out a new way, which is like really unknown and really scary and probably going to be unsupported because all my family are going to say, why are you doing that? Why are you putting your baby in a wrap? Why are you co-sleeping? Why are you breastfeeding? Why aren't they in another room? And all that kind of stuff. So it's doing a heck of a lot of work on yourself because your kids are going to challenge you, and you need to be able to be challenged, and you can't get all the answers right. I always say to Phoenix, like, even sometimes if I lose my temper, I'm like, I'm so sorry I lost my temper there. I don't know the answer to that question, and we'll talk it out, we'll figure it out. And I know some questions he's gonna. I'll tell you what. One question he asked me 2 weeks ago, and I was really upset when he asked me. Death, because I think where do babies come from is not as difficult as what happens when you die. So you're very straightforward. Like when you die, we die, as in like our life that we have ends. And then he deadpan looked at me, so does that mean you're going to die one day? Now I'm doing the dishes and trying to do dinner, right? And all I wanted was to curl up in a ball and cry my eyes off because like, oh my God, I'm not going to be here one day for him, But I had to be really brave and say, actually I'm not. But it's not going to happen for a really, 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 really long time. Okay, and then he skipped off, and I'm traumatized. Calling my therapist saying, I need to see you today because I'm in pieces. It's just so funny. But it's just knowing that you're not going to get it right, but just being open to learn.
Yes. So just to echo my friends here, I think that try to have a safe environment as possible, to make sure that they can bring up any questions that they come up to their head, and try to educate yourself as much as possible. And even if you don't know the answer, it's okay to be honest and just say, I need some time to get back to you on that, and I don't know the answer on those questions. And try to be as role model as possible, be a good listener, and make sure that they feel comfortable to come with anything that comes up to their head, and to be there. Like, we are in a stage that my son didn't luckily manage to start asking those tough questions, but obviously they are constantly running in my head, and I know that he will start asking those tough questions, and I'm keep imagining those scenarios and how I will react, and how I will what will be my answers, and how to address it. So to try to be prepared as much as possible, although kids has all very tough questions, and you can never be prepared to any questions that they come up with, but just to have those safe environment for them to try to be understanding, and also be very, very honest if you don't know the answers, and get back to that.
Just one other observation, and when the kids were very young, your ages, I insisted that we have family meals. And it is probably one of the best things we ever did. And I remember going, back to the thing that let the wounds of the past project your future. At dinner in our house when I was growing up, when the 6 o'clock news came on, everybody had to stop talking. Because it's the news, and okay, it was a different time, but yeah, and it was on the radio, it was on the wireless, and I have from get-go said no screens, no phones, no, we don't have a TV in the kitchen, the radio goes off, we are sitting here at dinner, and even to this day, last night there was only 5 of us at the dinner table, but probably 4 or 5 times a week we will sit down at dinner, and often those meals, and it might be just spaghetti bolognese, will go on for 2 hours because of the conversation. But that sitting as a family talking is probably one of the most important things I think you can do, because otherwise there isn't communication, and it's all about communication.
More questions? Some questions in the back there, Jolanta?
This might be a question more for Sharon and Dil. Would you be comfortable sharing with us your journey to same-sex parenting? And if so, tell us a bit more about the obstacles you had to overcome, especially from an administrative perspective.
Okay. Right. Draw your picture.
We're taking notes now.
Yeah. Draw your picture. No, so we I think the first thing we did was talk to other LGBTQ couples to figure out what way to do it, where to go, and I kept hearing about this great clinic in Clane, and which is maybe not so good anymore, but back then it was, right, because it was privately owned. It was just one company based in Ireland, also. So we went there, and they were brilliant, and we took our time, because when I met Anne-Marie, I was 37. And it was like, literally, we knew each other 5 minutes, and I'd already started talking about kids. It's amazing. She didn't run out the door. But it's like, it was literally like, I could see the last bus coming. So come on, leg it. Because I knew this conversation would take a while. It's not like you could literally, decide and then go get pregnant the following month. I was 41. By the time we actually had the resources, we were ready. So it took a long time. So absolutely, for us, we felt more comfortable to do it here. And we used a known donor from Denmark, which is like a clinic that's like the biggest apparently bank in the world, and it worked out really well, because then we used the same donor for our daughter, and I keep thinking, my parents, when I told them I was a lesbian, I think I remember my parents, one of the first things they thought was like, oh God, we're not going to have grandchildren, and they all thought that my sister was going to go off and have kids. At the end, she didn't have kids, and the lesbian ended up having kids. So I think it's so funny. Yeah, so it worked out really good. Some couples decide to go get pregnant abroad, and some people use a person they know, so it's very individual. You have to make up your own mind. And obviously, as a lesbian couple, we have 2 ovens, so it's much easier for us, so I would have loved to have had a perspective of 2 gay dads, because that is an absolute nightmare, especially with the AHR bill still not coming through, so it will be much more challenging. But yeah, it can be done, but you need 2 people committed, and counseling would be really important, because I've always spoken to couples, and sometimes one really wants the baby and the other one doesn't, and so it's really good to kind of sit in front of someone and really figure out why do you want to start a family together, and that can then help you during the tough times, because that fertility roller coaster, I could talk hours about that. So we were really lucky. It was second time I went for an IUI, and it was great because I got to see what the theater looked like. I got to see the procedure, the little gown with the gap at the back, and with your legs in the strap. Yeah, awful. But then when the IVF came around the second time, I got pregnant because I was already prepared, but I know couples who've gone 6, 7, 8, 9 times, and every time you're pregnant, you put all this hope, and then it's crushed, and it's really hard. So make sure you get some support while you're doing it.
Thank you. For us, it was first doing a lot of research, educating ourselves, as they said, speaking with other couples, speaking with other parents, understanding what are the possibilities that we have around us, if we want to bring the kid with someone that we know, if we want to have an open donor, if we want to have a closed donor, if we want to have anonymous donor. So educate ourselves on all the options that we have, and understanding what does it mean, understanding from where we can even buy the sperm donor, and from which banks are there, and how can we even do the procedures. And obviously, yes, having this conversation between us and understanding why we want to have a family, what is important to us, and understanding also deciding who will carry the baby. So for us, it was a decision that my wife will carry the baby because she's older than me. And
Detect some ageism here.
So just first, as I mentioned, to educate ourselves, to do the research, and then we decided, we did the procedure in Israel, so we decided actually to bring a donor, a sperm donor from US. And for us, the decision was to have an open donor, meaning that our kid will be able to contact the donor when he will be 18. It was an important decision for us because we thought that we cannot decide for our kid if he will know the donor or not, and it's something that we should leave it for him to decide. Obviously, there is also cost effective of that, so open donor costs more than any other donor. So we brought the sperm from US to Israel, and then we started the procedure there. We managed to, my wife managed to get pregnant. She always ate the fact that I'm saying we when she was the one get pregnant on our fourth attempt. And we were lucky because it was actually just about our flight to Dublin before moving here to Dublin. So it was our last attempt before moving to Dublin, and we got lucky on that. And as I mentioned earlier, for us also the struggle was about the birth certificate. Unfortunately, it was a huge issue for us because it was important for both of us to be registered as the mom of the kid. And here in Dublin, it's unfortunate, but it cannot happen. So for us, we went to Belfast in order to have for the delivery of our kid. Unfortunately, still in Israel, I'm not registered as a mom of the kid because over there it's still illegal as well. So I'm only here in Dublin now and in Belfast, in Northern Ireland.
Question beside you.
Yeah, thanks. So this also would be a little bit more about same-sex parenting. So my husband and I have recently started looking into this. And one of the things that worried us a little bit is what could potentially happen when the kid gets to school. In particular, we read or heard about kids sometimes getting bullied because they have two same-sex parents, or sometimes we realized that some kids might feel the pressure about coming out to their peers and talk about their family. So I was wondering if you ever thought of these aspects, and how would you feel like handling these worries? Yeah.
Maybe actually, Bella, just it might be useful to get some of your insights in terms of the work you see in school.
Yeah, sure. Like, I was actually talking to a parent the other day who's has a kid from a previous relationship, and his kid is like 3, and he hasn't told his kid that he's gay. because it hasn't come up. But if you have two dads, I think it comes up faster probably. Yeah, there is that worry. Kids get picked on for lots of different reasons, and we wouldn't stop them going out into the world. They could have, a disability that, kids have many questions about. They could, even I got asked as a kid, where's your dad and things like that. As long as you keep it that they can always come back to you and tell you what their day was like and have that constant dialogue. Like my mom asked me every single day, how was my day, and like having that, like the dinner time or something like that, so they can talk to you about it. But you just can't take that on as something you've done to your kid, because you're not doing it to your kid. It's, it's everybody else will get better. And unfortunately, this generation of kids are kind of the groundbreakers. And that's difficult in a way that you don't want your kid to be the groundbreakers, but they will be, and it will be all for the better ultimately. But it will actually be coming from adults, not the kids. The kids will be confused. They'll ask. They'll get an explanation. They'll be like, "That's fine. When's lunch?" Particularly at a young age. Get them into preschool, and then they'll be grand. It'll be adults. So you got to have a chat. You got to get some tough skin and have some chats. But I'm sure one of you can probably answer that as well.
I think for us, like, it's not just the same-sex parenting part. For us, we are very, as parents, quite alternative, if you haven't guessed, with the home births and the breastfeeding and this and that. Yeah, which is for me so sad in a way, because that's how people used to give birth before. So in many ways we are very non-mainstream. So we are constantly having, if it's conversations with family members or with friends, so we constantly feel we're the trailblazers, and sometimes it just gets very tiring. But we found our tribe in relation to a school. We send, speaking of no screens, the Steiner, which is a kind of a school that has no screens, no plastic. You play only outside, So there's some great ones in Ireland. They're just they're really taking on, because I think parents are becoming quite aware that educate together are great, but there is a lot of emphasis on technology. There's a lot of emphasis. The classes are quite big as well, So we feel this, be involved, do the research. Because I talk to so many parents, because it's okay. So when I was trying to get pregnant, I was talking to people. When I was pregnant, and then trying to figure out how to give birth in Ireland, hospital, this, that, and the other. So, and then when it came to schooling, I talked to homeschoolers. I talked to everybody. I didn't rule anybody out, And I feel we are very much on the that end where if something was to happen to the school, we would homeschool tomorrow, because that's how passionate we are about. Because our children's emotional well-being is so important. And working in mental health as a psychotherapist, we get calls every day from parents who are worried about their 5-year-old, 8-year-old, 12-year-old, 15-year-old, and a lot of the mental health issues are there because of what's happening in school, because of social media, because of bullying and all that. So I'm very conscious that there are a lot of people who are working in the schools who mean really, really well, but the system itself, the pressure to do the junior cert, the pressure to do the leaving cert, to me, that for me is the biggest worry. In relation to bullying, absolutely on a daily basis, you check in with your kid, but I think if you give them that emotional resilience, where they'll be able to stand up, and I can already see it in Phoenix as a 4-year-old, correcting people. No, I have 2 moms, and he's going to get more and more stronger with that, and so sometimes I think that there's a bigger conversation around just the environment that the kids grow up in, especially if you're a same-sex parent. There's a lot of other parents in general are quite worried about the system, so it's really important to question. Just because everybody's doing this thing or this way doesn't mean that it might necessarily fit you. So as your individuals, when you become a parent, remain an individual. Don't feel that you have to conform and just go with everybody else. Just make sure that you do what is best. Child-led. You said child-led, whether it's baby-led weaning, whether it's baby-led potty training, whether it's whatever it is. Your child. A lot of people can't have this idea that children are like a blank canvas. A clean slate. Not at all. Not at all. I feel my greatest teachers are my children. I've learned more from my children than I've learned from anybody else. Ask them. They will tell you where to go. So, thanks.
Thank you.
Yes, so let's be honest, kids are mean. and unfortunately, this is the fact of the world, and I don't think that we can stop them from bullying, although I wish we could. And we can only try to do our best in order to educate, to raise awareness, and to try to change things. So for me, I will do everything in my power in order to protect my son and teach him to be resilient and to teach him to stand up for himself and for others, and to try to be the one that also change things around. But I also will be the one that will stand up and to try to change things for him and for other kids in order to make sure that we are in a world that are progressing and we are in a world that is changing and for the better.
So we're almost out of time. I just did want to build on that point around kind of building resilience, but we kind of flip it around. Like, I'd love to get your advice on how, as parents, can parents help all children become more accepting in those situations so that bullying isn't as much of an issue.
Well, from my perspective, you just don't. They learn by example.
Yeah.
You know, we talked about child led, but if I'm walking down the street, you know, I hate people who throw rubbish. You know, and if I saw one of my kids throwing rubbish, I'd be furious. You know, but they don't throw rubbish because we don't throw rubbish, and they don't stare at people in a wheelchair because we don't stare at people, or people of colour, or people who are older, or people who have a disability, or who are gay, or whatever. And it's that openness and communication, and you know. All of my kids have been bullied. One in particular was bullied very badly, and that's a whole different story. But what I tried to do for my child is say, look, this is who you are. Focus on your ability, your strength, and a huge amount of emotional and just, you know, that. Like, he didn't leave the. You talk about the co-sleeping. Like, I think he was about 13 before he actually moved into his own room. Now, he had his own room, and he did leave for a lot, and we'd move him at night. But he just needed that physical. He needed to know there was a safe place, and so I think it's example and knowing that, and giving them the security to believe that they are fantastic people, regardless of the really, really vicious, horrible things people say. And it's not just kids. We know that this happens in the workplace. This happens walking down the street. This happens, you know, everywhere. So it's knowing they're loved and they have real value.
Yeah, like, it starts with you, you know. We are all sexist, racist, ableist, misogynistic, garbage people. Just trying to be less garbagey every day.
Well, climate strike today.
Yeah.
Should get to March.
Like, yeah, exactly. Like, we're all just undoing all of that damage. Like, I cannot sit here and say that I am not a racist, misogynist, ableist. I am. So you have to start from that, from the beginning, and just try to see equal value in every single person, because you've been programmed not to do that. And you can actually, so much through your child's eyes, see the world anew and let them lead the way in terms of, you know, seeing the beauty in the world. Because kids just think everything's just so great. Like, you know, they're fantastic, but also they're all individuals. You know, while some kid needs, you know, that type of security, and I was one of those kids, I needed a lot of reassurance, a lot of security. Another kid needs a lot of space, you know. So there's no normal. And then just like, you know, we as individuals shouldn't be comparing our chapter 2 to someone else's chapter 15 in their book. And, you know, don't do that with other people's kids and the Instagram. Don't, you know, you know, you never know what a fight it was to get that picture of the two kids holding hands looking at the sunset. And they've done that to fill some sort of void. So, you know, just like, don't judge yourself against none of it, no matter if you're a parent or anything. Just like, you know, delete Instagram maybe.
Don't they own Instagram? Self-awareness for me is like paramount in parenting. You know, your own self-awareness. The better you know yourself, the better you can then trust your instinct. Because I think you doubt yourself a million times a day. Am I doing the right thing? Should I be doing this? Should I be more like the other mom in the school? You know, because she seems to have it all together more than I do. You know, but if you believe in yourself and obviously know yourself, you'll know what is right for you and your child. You know, and then that self-awareness will then be transferred to your child, because you're constantly, you know, because I remember as a kid, no one ever asked me, what do I want to do? You know, how do I feel about this? You know, and it really annoys me, because it was all about fulfilling my duty as a daughter, fulfilling my duty as a woman in society, living for others, caring for others, not speak out even if I knew that I should, So it's being able to instill those messages in our children, because if they become self-aware, they then will look inwards, and if they want to change the world, they will do it because they actually want to from inside, not because they feel a sense of responsibility. Oh, everybody's doing it there, and that's not going to cut it. You want people to really understand. Inspiring change in self and society. That's something my wife and I really care about. And so, from a mental health point of view, if we look after ourselves, there's a great saying: if you heal the wounds of what hurt you, you won't bleed on the people who didn't cut you, But unfortunately, that's why there's so much wrong in the world today, because we are passing on the hurt to somebody else instead of actually looking at ourselves, confronting the trauma, the demons, the whatever, and then letting it go. So that's I think the best thing that we can help our children if they can become self-aware. Yes, of course, the books and everything that's all important, but just know yourself first.
I'm just very conscious that I might sound like, parenting 101, this is how to do it. And I just want to be absolutely reassure you, I am the least Instagram parent. Like, if my children were here, they would be going, it's all lies, Mum, and you've made it all up. It's not true. Because parenting, as Jill said, is really hard work. And sometimes, and a lot of the time, I'm really shit at it. And you know what I mean? So it's all you can do is try and wake up and say, okay, I screwed up yesterday. What can I try and do today? And it's not that everything's perfect in our world. It most certainly isn't, and I don't know any family that it is. So I don't want to put that impression across. We just try.
Yeah, just to echo that, be the role model for our kids, and to ensure that we are showing them how to respect each other, how to show compassion, how to treat each person individual and to respect them for who they are, and also to be able and comfortable to be their true self in a group, and understand the group value, but also understand how they can be them true self and be we very much self-aware, as you mentioned, and understand the world and also the differences inside of it.
So sadly, we are out of time. I firstly want to apologise for a rather sweary Lynne Tracey.
I know, sorry. Yeah. Some people here know that. They know who I am.
But more importantly, I want to thank all of the panel. So I want to thank Dill, Bella, Lynne and Sharan for joining us here today. So thank you very much.